Welcome to the Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee dated February 20th, 2025. Appreciate everyone coming for this informational hearing on changes at the national level on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's the job of this committee to be vigilant to changes at the state and federal level that will impact our work in terms of consumer protection and to bring attention to the very recent and very large federal changes regarding the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and how that would impact Minnesotans' financial safety. Similar to what we did when there was a transfer of the Commerce Fraud Bureau over to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We just want to do the full work of this committee and being fully aware of those, fully informed of them, and seeing if we can mitigate any negative impacts on our citizenry. So I'll just start with a little introductory comments about what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is and what the recent changes have been. And then I will turn it over to presentations from the Attorney General and from the Commerce Department. Members, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created 15 years ago in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis to protect regular people from predatory and deceptive practices of big banks and lenders. And since its inception, it has saved American consumers $20 billion. It focuses on four things: preventing deceptive, unfair, and abusive practices in the financial services industry, enforcing existing consumer protection laws, receiving and addressing consumer complaints about the industry, monitoring financial markets for potential risks and warning consumers, and offering financial education and resources to help consumers make more informed choices. The changes that prompted this hearing at the federal level: on February 7th, members of Elon Musk's unofficial Department of Government Efficiency entered the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau headquarters and gained access to information technology systems, human resources, finance systems, procurement, and more. Musk's deputies took control of the CFPB website and social media. It deleted the account from Musk's X platform, and it presents a 404 error on consumerfinance.gov. Musk's team at that time added themselves to internal staff directories at the CFPB. The same weekend, the Office of Management and Budget Director and acting CFPB Director Russell Vought ordered all staff to stop work. Vought then rejected scheduled funding for the agency from the Federal Reserve. The directive from Vought told staff to halt any pending investigation, stop compliance and oversight of companies, and suspend enactment of consumer protection rules that were set to go into effect. What that could mean for Minnesotans: dismantling the Bureau will leave Minnesotans exposed to financial abuse and predatory practices. In the last year, Minnesotans submitted 17,000 complaints to CFPB on credit reporting, debt collection, virtual currency, credit cards, checking and savings accounts, mortgages, student loans, vehicle loans, and more. As a state, we have a proud tradition of strong consumer protections and a fair marketplace. In the past 2 years, this committee has enacted policies that empower Minnesotans to protect themselves from scams and fraudsters, promote transparency and a fair and honest marketplace, and help people make informed decisions about how and where to spend their hard-earned money. Today, we'll hear from the Department of Commerce and the Attorney General to better understand the impact that these changes could have and how we can address them. And with that, I will turn it over to Jacqueline Olson, Enforcement Assistant Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Senator Chair Klein. Can you hear me okay? Okay, my name for the record is Jacqueline Olson. I'm Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Commerce. I lead our enforcement division at Commerce. Since Chair Klein just gave a background on who the CFPB is, I'll skip that part and I will just get to sort of what Commerce does. I will say of note, I think in the presentation, there's a slide that talks about the CFPB numbers in terms of like how much they've saved consumers, what kind of relief that they've been giving consumers. And I think it's just important to note that. That was just pulled from their website. So just know those aren't my numbers, those are the CFPB numbers. I think importantly is their Victim Relief Fund, which is essentially a fund to compensate victims of deceptive acts and practices and that type of thing. So I just want to give background a little bit about our enforcement division at Commerce, as well as our financial institution division at Commerce. Some of you may know Commerce generally pretty well, but I just kind of want to dig a little bit deeper just to help you understand where Commerce does have authority in this space. So in our enforcement division, there's essentially 3 teams I want to focus on that deal with the CFPB more often than not, or at least we have concurrent jurisdiction with them. The first is our multi-industry team. So this is a team of investigators who investigate complaints from consumers for some of the similar things that they complained to the CFPB for. So included in that is collections, credit services, debt management, debt settlement, lending, that would be payday lending, consumer lending, as well as money transmitters, and our student loan advocate also sits in our enforcement division on that team. So that team does currently investigate complaints in the vein of some of the similar things that the CFPB does. So that work will continue at Commerce. In 2024, this team opened 1,000 investigations, which were based on consumer complaints. And we took 36 actions and assessed $2.1 million in civil penalties, as well as $450,000 in recoveries. And basically what a recovery is if we're able to get relief for the consumer based on a company's bad act or illegal act, then we're able to give them money back. The second team I want to focus on that also deals with the CFPB is our real estate mortgage and title team. So they investigate complaints involving all aspects of real estate. That would be real estate agents, brokers, companies, closers, appraisers, AMCs. So that team already does that work, and that work will also continue. That team in 2024 opened 673 investigations and has taken 53 actions since the beginning of 2024 with $630,000 in civil penalties. So that work will also continue. And finally, our senior fraud team, which also sits in our enforcement division, and they are given authority under Chapter 45A to place holds on transactions if they're trying to prevent some sort of fraud or financial exploitation from happening. So that team, they opened over 1,000 investigations in 2024, and they put holds on $7.7 million to prevent fraud and financial exploitation from occurring for seniors and vulnerable adults. So I just wanted to give that background about our enforcement division. So we do have concurrent jurisdiction with the CFPB on a lot of things. The next, I want to talk a little bit about our financial institutions division. So they do examinations. So basically that's a deep dive into a company's practices to see whether they're complying with the state laws, with the federal laws. And their examinations are done separate from the CFPB. Sometimes they walk side by side, where the CFPB will open an exam and our team will open an exam as well. But we kind of follow a different path, but we're still concurrent jurisdiction. And those examinations include over mortgage originators, mortgage servicers, student loan servicing, consumer finance such as auto finance, money transmitter. So the CFPB also has authority to do those exams. And so that authority from Commerce will not go away either. We'll continue to do the good work that we do. I think, so the impacts, I think that's what the committee is most interested in the most about the impacts of our work on what happens at the federal level. So I think there'll be an impact on consumers seeking help. So as Chair Klein had said, that they have a complaint database. They receive complaints from all over the country. And included in that are complaints from Minnesota consumers. And so we don't necessarily they don't refer things to us to say, hey, we have these Minnesota complaints, can you take this on Commerce? We go in and we access that database to pull information to say, where are the Minnesota consumers who filed complaints? And we do that on our enforcement teams for the ones I mentioned, as well as our exam teams. They review those as well. So if something happens to that complaint database, that would have a big impact on our ability to see the consumers out there that might have issues in areas that we regulate. So, we want to make sure, and we'll be getting the word out as much as we can, that people can file complaints with us. If they don't have access to the CFPB's complaint database or ability to file it, they can file it with us. Because we do have a lot of concurrent jurisdiction, but that will likely increase, obviously, the number of complaints we get, the number of investigations we open, and that kind of thing. But we're here to take on what we can in that space. And I think one thing I do want to reiterate about the specific concerns, because I'm here to talk about Commerce's jurisdiction and what we have jurisdiction over. We do not have jurisdiction over federal banks, which include credit card companies. We don't have jurisdiction over federal credit unions or the credit bureaus. The CFPB is the primary investigator of those complaints. And so we, as a Commerce team, when we receive complaints from consumers, if it's something outside of our jurisdiction, such as a federal bank, we'll refer it to the CFPB. If that option isn't available, I'm not sure where the consumers would go. I mean, we can refer things to the OCC or the FDIC, but that's not a space that Commerce occupies. So we wouldn't be able to help in that space. And I think I just wanted to touch on what other states have been doing in reaction to some of the changes at the federal level. Is some of them have been adding staff to take on more investigations and take in more complaints. There's more increased collaboration between AGs as well as between state regulators, which has existed in the past, but it might, I anticipate that it will continue to grow. And also an increase in multi-state litigation. There were times when we have had an action with the CFPB or something like that, but those actions also will continue with state regulators banding together. It's just we wouldn't have necessarily access to any sort of information from the CFPB, but that work would continue. But I anticipate that there'll be more multi-state sort of coordination in that space. And I just wanted to note, I think I don't want to talk, these aren't my recommendations, but the CFPB did publish something at the beginning of January. And if it's I can give you a link, I can give members a link to that document where it's basically a report of saying where should state regulatory agencies be in this space if something happens, or to increase consumer protection at the state level. So a couple of the high-level things that are in there is they recommended incorporating abusive practices into existing laws, creating stronger remedies and tools for enforcement, eliminating the requirement to prove monetary injuries. And I think of this in terms of more like privacy or cybersecurity, where there might not be a monetary component or an injury, but there is an injury. Extend consumer protections to business transactions, and revitalize private enforcement for privacy violations. So those are some of what the CFPB has recommended. Those aren't my recommendations, but I don't want to speak directly to that. But I will send a link to the committee, to members if they're interested in reading that report to find out where can states step in the absence of action by the federal government. And I think those are the highlights of what I wanted to hit. I'm happy to take questions, or if you want to take questions after our other testifiers up here, I'll be sticking around too, so I will leave it up to you.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. I think we will go to questions for the Department of Commerce before the other testifiers, and I'll start. Since the events of February 7th, has the Department of Commerce noticed any change yet?
We have not noticed a change except for an increase in complaints, which I don't know if that's attributed to that, but it also could be attributed to us promoting our website and saying that you can file a complaint. As far as we just yesterday got a referral from a consumer, and it involved a federal bank. And in terms of that, we always refer those to the CFPB, which we did from that consumer, and we are scheduled to call that consumer back to find out if they actually were able to reach somebody at the CFPB, but I don't know that personally, but we did. It appeared that we could still refer things to them, but I don't know what happened after that. So we'll be following up with that consumer to find out if that was a dead end for them or if they were able to get assistance.
Other questions or comments from the committee? Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And could you tell me, when you talked about the federal bank that you had a complaint on, and you plan on calling them back to see if they were able to speak to anybody? So in the past, before we started talking about the federal government, what they're doing and the impact it's going to have, Did you follow them up in the past to see if they'd gotten any results?
No. Oh, sorry. Senator Dames, Chair Klein, thank you for the question. No, we wouldn't generally follow up with consumers prior to this happening to find out if they are actually reached out to the CFPB. Some of them do contact us and say either it was resolved or they got help, or we just never hear from them again. But we wanted to make sure, at least now, that they have gotten a response.
Senator
Mr. Chair,
Dames.
follow-up?
Senator Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so how are you going to know if there's any difference? If you weren't doing it in the past, what do you have for benchmark to show that something has changed?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, Senator Dames. Chair Klein, I think we'll know by the increase in complaints. I do think that if consumers don't have a place to go, and this has happened in the past, where if they're not getting a response either from a different agency, whether that's a state agency or a federal agency, they will continue to follow up with us. So that is something we'll be monitoring closely, as well as trying to measure to see what kind of complaints are increasing. So that is something that we'll be doing going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions from the committee or comments? Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess, I'm going to that enforcement division, and you've got the multi-industry team, you got the real estate team, you got the senior fraud team. How many investigators are in those three categories?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, Senator Howard, Chair Klein. On our senior fraud team, we have 3 people. On our multi-industry team, I believe we have 7. And on our real estate team, I believe we have 8.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Assistant Commissioner, so where are these investigators actually officed?
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Howe, Chair Klein. The Department of Commerce we follow a hybrid work schedule, so some of them do come in the office, and as well as some of them work from home, just depending on the day and the business need.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And are these investigators licensed law enforcement folks, or are they just investigators that just do, they're not, I guess the question is, are they licensed or not licensed law enforcement folks?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, Senator Howe, Chair Klein. On our civil side, they are not licensed law enforcement officers. These are investigators, some of whom worked in the industries that we regulate, and some of them who have come to Commerce to be specific investigators on our civil complaints.
Any other questions or comments from the Committee for the Department of Commerce? Senator Green, sorry.
I could have waited. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to read through this, but you did make a statement that you have more information that you could get to us on these policies that you're looking for here. Can I get that? Could you get that to me? Or is it on the website that I can start reading it now?
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Green, Chair Klein, I was referring to the report that was put out by the CFPB about their recommendations, and we can get that. We can send that over to you. I don't think that's published it's published, it's online, it's free public access, but we can specifically send it to you that has more laid out of the CFPB's recommendations.
All right, thank you.
Lead Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And could you tell me how these investigators are paid? I mean, where's the money come from? Does it come from the general fund, or does it come from some of the private money, finance, banks?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, Senator Dames, Chair Klein. They are all funded through the general fund.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Lead Dames.
And so can you tell me why these were not moved over with the insurance fraud investigators? Why they weren't moved over to the new team? Wouldn't that have been a natural fit?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, Senator Dames, Chair Klein. So this is our civil investigators. The people that moved over to the BCA were our criminal investigators, and those were some of the licensed peace officers that we're speaking of, and they do criminal investigations. We don't do criminal investigations on our civil side. So we do civil investigations into licensee conduct, that kind of thing.
Follow up,
Dames.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the insurance fraud portion of it, a large percentage of theirs, I don't believe, are criminal investigations.
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Dames, Chair Klein. So our insurance team They are a civil investigative team, so they investigate complaints from consumers involving insurance companies and insurance agencies and whether they complied with state law in their helping them and assisting them. And our civil team, they only focus on administrative actions. So if there is an administrative action, that goes through the administrative process. And the civil team wouldn't be investigating criminal conduct. That is something that is reserved for criminal investigators.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Lead Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me what % of your employees are working from home?
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Dames, Chair Klein, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can certainly give that to you.
Thank you, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming by today. Senator Duckworth.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just a quick one. Does the Minnesota Department of Commerce work with the FTC at all as it relates to consumers or any other experiences? And if so, could you elaborate on that, please?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, Senator Duckworth, Chair Klein. I think work with would be a tough, I don't know if I'd say work with. I would say we work in conjunction with sometimes, because again, that's another organization where we would have concurrent jurisdiction. So we don't have joint actions that we've been involved in with the FTC. We have referred consumers to the FTC for their areas that they regulate, and people who report scams. You know, we don't take that information. We refer them and say, could you send that to the FTC because they're tracking that. So I would think it's more of a concurrent jurisdiction in terms, but we don't necessarily work with them directly.
Senator Duckworth.
If I may, Mr. Chair, could you, just for our understanding, give us an idea of what some of those referrals might look like in terms of Minnesotans who you're referring to the FTC for help? With what kind of matters would you say?
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Duckworth, Chair Klein. So to the FTC, we'd be referring I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like if there's a telephone call violations to say that they're getting these terrible phone calls, like that's not something that we would cover, as well as I'd said scams. If it's a scam that's completely outside of our realm, we'd refer that to the FTC as well.
Mechanisms or maybe specialized areas it focuses on as well that the state Commerce Department kind of works with or tries to steer people toward? Is that kind of a fair understanding of that relationship?
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Duckworth, Chair Klein, I think that is a fair assessment that they do have a consumer protection portion of it. I've never worked for the FTC, so I can't speak for them, but yes.
Thank you.
Senator Duckworth, yeah. Thank you so much for coming by, Assistant Commissioner. Did your other person at the table want to testify as well, or just there for support? Okay, got it.
Just for support.
We're grateful to learn more about your department. I do think that your work will be impacted by the changes at the federal level, and we look forward to sort of coordinating with you again to sort of mitigate downstream effects on Minnesotans. We all, most of us lived through the 2008 financial crisis and hope that that never occurs to people again. People in Minnesota lost their homes. And so that important work will carry forward, and it looks like it may fall to us at the state level to do that. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
We now can call forward Australia Ford and Jacob Richter.
Good afternoon,
Welcome to
Chair.
the, yep, and wait 1 minute. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Ford. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Yep, thank you. My name is Australia Ford. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Australia Ford, and I'm a parenting student at Metropolitan State University in St. Paul, Minnesota. I have an associate's degree in creative writing and am currently pursuing my bachelor's in professional communication and technical writing. I want to work in journalism and advocacy so that I can raise awareness of important issues that don't get the attention they deserve. I'm here today to share the impact of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has had on Minnesotans like me. I am a mother to 4 amazing children, ages 3 months to 13 years of age. As most mothers will tell you, our lives are beautiful. My children and I are so blessed. But as most student parents will tell you, our lives are also very hard. Harder than they should be because higher learning was not built for parents. And yet, here we are. 1 in 5 college students have children. Being a student parent, particularly a single mother, is like balancing on a tightrope at the circus. You creep forward slowly, steadying yourself against an unexpected wind gust. You wobble, take a breath, and try to pause. The moment you regain your balance, life hurts 3 balls at you and demands that you juggle. Juggle the demands of school, work, and family. And as you slowly move forward toward a better future, inch by inch, a new challenge emerges. You have to get on a unicycle, all the while making sure you don't drop any balls or plummet off the road. My greatest challenges as a student parent have been financial. Going to school, securing quality, affordable childcare for my children, meeting our family's basic needs, these things all cost money. A few years ago, when I was enrolled in a community college and working at an entry-level job, I made too much to qualify for public assistance, but not enough to live on. It took months to find childcare centers for my kids, and the care cost almost as much as my home. After rent, childcare, groceries, and utilities, I was in the negative. The stress of working, going to school, taking care of my kids, and having to worry about when bills hit my bank account was overwhelming. I felt dangerously close to falling off that tightrope. Around this time, I borrowed a couple $100s from what I now understand to be a predatory lender. It was a really tight month, and I just needed a little more money in the bank to make ends meet. However, I didn't realize I was signing up for exorbitant interest rates to the tune of 390% that were designed to trap me in a cycle of debt. And they did. All of my payments went toward the interest. If I was running behind on a payment, there were late fees in addition to compounded interest. At one point, I paid $690 in interest and over $1,000 in late fees and charges, all for a $280 loan. This is why we need the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The CFPB protects consumers across the country. Whether it's unlawful student loan debt collection practices, prohibiting junk feed, or capping predatory payday interest rates, they have returned more than $17.5 billion to wrong customers, including those in Minnesota, where they took action on more than 32,000 complaints. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is crucial for people like me. Without the protection that the CFPB provides, I might still be trapped in a cycle of debt that would have been nearly impossible to escape. The challenges of being a student parent, trying to make ends meet, and balancing the care for my children with my education are overwhelming enough without being taken advantage of by a predatory lender. Thanks to the CFPB and nonprofit organizations like Exodus Lending, I've been able to reclaim some control over my financial future. But I know many others in Minnesota continue to face these same battles. That's why it is so important that we continue to support the CFPB and its vital mission to protect consumers, restore fairness, and hold financial institutions accountable. Every student, every parent, and every person deserves the chance to build a better life without the constant fear of being financially exploited. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to protecting the rights of consumers like me.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Mr. Jacob Richter, please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Chair Klein, distinguished members of this committee, my name is Jacob Richter. I'm a senior at the University of Minnesota, studying political science and global studies with a minor in Chinese. As a first-generation college student from a low-income background from Woodbury, Minnesota, I have had to be financially independent since I was 18. Before the North Star Promise Scholarship, I cobbled together tuition through a combination of merit-based scholarships, financial aid, loans, and income from my part-time job. My dream is to work in policy, maybe in Washington, D.C., but right now my focus is making it through school without drowning in financial stress. Predatory rent-fixing practices are making it increasingly difficult for students like me to afford housing, stay in school, and plan for the future. I live in an off-campus apartment complex in Dinkytown near the University of Minnesota, where I share a 4-bedroom apartment and 2-bathroom unit, and I pay $695 a month. That might sound reasonable compared to the sky-high rents in other parts of the country and other parts of Minneapolis, but the reality is a lot more complicated. The price of rent in student housing is unpredictable and inconsistent. Even within my own apartment, my roommates and I pay different amounts for identical rooms because landlords and property managers manipulate pricing based on lease signing dates. The rates change arbitrarily, and students who don't have the time, expertise, or financial flexibility to negotiate are often left scrambling. Worse, large developers and property management companies are using rent-setting algorithms to artificially inflate rents. These companies claim that the technology helps determine fair market value, but in reality, it's being used to maximize landlord profits at the expense of students and low-income renters. Across the country, we've seen these algorithms drive rents up, pricing people out of their homes, consolidating the market into the hands of large institutional landlords, and worsening the housing crisis we are facing. In Dinkytown, a large luxury development went up last year. This single project is already affecting rental prices in my neighborhood, and with rent-setting software in the mix, students like me don't stand a chance. For students, rent is the single largest expense we have after tuition, and it's an expense that financial aid often does not cover. Even with the North Star Promise Scholarship, which has been a game changer for me, truly, I still struggle to make ends meet. If my rent goes up suddenly and unfairly, what am I supposed to do? Work more hours, take out more loans, cut back on food or healthcare, drop out of college? This isn't an abstract policy debate because it's real for students across Minnesota, students like me. Unchecked rent-fixing practices are making college unaffordable, forcing students into uncertain financial situations and adding stress that directly affects academic success. The impact of unaffordable housing extends far beyond students. Nationally, rental debt has surpassed $9 billion, with over 4.5 million households behind on rent. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has taken critical steps to address this crisis, investigating over 1,700 rental debt complaints since August 2023. These complaints expose how landlords and debt collectors charge tenants for illegitimate fees, routine maintenance, and predatory collection practices. The CFPB's oversight is essential in protecting vulnerable renters, including students, from being exploited. But all of this is at risk. If the CFPB is shut down, renters will have nowhere to turn when landlords engage in price gouging, unfair fees, and exploitative practices. The corporate landlords and debt collectors who have been held accountable will once again operate without oversight, leaving students and millions of other renters defenseless against predatory behavior. Additionally, as a student who has struggled to afford college, I've taken out federal student loans. The United States currently has $1.69 trillion in federal student loan debt, and I'm included in that number. My lender is Mahela, a company that has been fraught with controversy due to unfair lending practices. In October 2023, the United States Department of Education, another agency that is threatened by the current administration, found that Mahela failed to send monthly student loan bills to 2.5 million borrowers, resulting in 800,000 borrowers missing a monthly payment. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Student Loan Ombudsman's annual report revealed that Mahela committed a shocking range of processing errors, including losing borrowers' account histories, miscalculating monthly bills, and taking the wrong amount of money from borrowers' bank accounts. Without the CFPB doing this work, who is going to protect student loan borrowers like me? We need someone policing this bad behavior and protecting consumers. Without the CFPB, there will be no watchdog ensuring fairness in the rental market and student loan financing. That is why the state of Minnesota needs to step up to fill the void, creating strong protections and regulatory oversight to ensure that students and renters are not left vulnerable to corporate exploitation. I urge you to take action to preserve and strengthen these protections so that we are not left to fend for ourselves in an increasingly unregulated economy. Thank you for your time and opportunity to share my story.
Thank you, Mr. Richter. Are there other members of the public who would like to testify on the issue? All right. Are there any questions for the testifiers from the committee? Thank you both so much for coming down. The published, not for you guys, but for Senator Green, the published report from CFPB that gave state strategies for addressing developments is now posted on the Commerce website on our agenda and can be accessed electronically there. The Attorney General has some testimony to give us. He's on his way over from Minneapolis and is stuck in traffic. He will be here within 5 to 7 minutes. We will recess for 10 minutes. Committee will come back to order. We have been reviewing the changes at the federal level in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the work that that bureau has done up until this date and how it might be changing the lives of Minnesotans. We're pleased to hear from the Department of Commerce, and now we have with us Attorney General Keith Ellison. Mr. Attorney General. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keith Ellison, Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. I'm joined by my colleague, who is the deputy of our Consumer Division, Jessica Whitney. Members, I'll confess, I have an emotional attachment to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. Even though I've heard countless stories about its impact, it's not hard for me to pinpoint where that attachment comes from. Whenever I think of the CFPB and all it does for consumers in Minnesota and across America, I think of my late friend, Sharon Tolbert Glover. Many knew Sharon as a sparky ex-nun who helped to reopen St. Peter Claver Catholic School in St. Paul's Rondo neighborhood. Others knew her as a powerful presence in the Twin Cities civil rights community. I knew her as a mentor and a friend. When Sharon took her chair to testify at a field hearing of the House Financial Services Committee on the effects of predatory lending in the Twin Cities in 2007, which I organized as a member of that committee, I had already seen her shed quiet tears in her living room. I felt a wave of heat pass through my body as I listened to this beloved senior citizen explain how stress and anxiety connected to an impending foreclosure that kept her up all night and every night. Sharon was surviving on about $2,100 a month with Social Security and a small pension from her late husband. Her original mortgage was $1,200 a month, so things were tight but manageable. Then, like the start of so many consumer horror stories, Sharon was approached by a slick-talking liar. The first mortgage finance salesperson spoke kindly about Sharon's late husband. She said she trusted him. He told her that her $1,200 monthly payment would go down. Instead, it went up to $1,500 a month, which she couldn't possibly afford. Sharon's finances were so squeezed that she was desperate to set things by a second mortgage refi seller who promised to fix everything and bring her monthly payments back down. She trusted him. And after the paperwork went through, her payments went up again. Now she's paying about $1,900 every month, leaving her with $200 a month for groceries, medicine, and health-related costs. She said, "Keith, I just can't do it anymore." And I could see the tears rolling down her face. In that moment, I felt contempt for the people who did that to her. Sharon must have sensed my anger. But this kind, fiery ex-nun said, "I even pray for people who do wrong. Maybe they need it most." I left Sharon's home filled with a righteous fury, more motivated than ever to help make sure that what happened to Sharon wouldn't happen to anyone else. And I saw that, and I saw the CFPB as part of that. The CFPB is Congress's response to the financial crisis of 2008, which was precipitated by a massive irresponsibility in the financial services sector, known as the subprime mortgage crisis. This crisis caused the recession of 2008 and led to more than 3 million people's homes ending up in foreclosure, including in my district. My neighborhood in North Minneapolis was especially hard hit. I admit, I felt like a sucker after I voted for the $800 million Wall Street bailout, but it made me all the more adamant that we build something lasting to protect the real victims of this crisis from future harm. As a brand new congressman, I helped organize the congressional field hearing in Minneapolis where Sharon Tolbert Glover shared her story. I aided in the drafting of the statutory language for the CFPB to stop predatory lending. I helped to defend the CFPB in the House Financial Services Committee. I voted for it, spoke in favor of it on the House floor, voted for it again when it returned from the Senate. I proudly attended the White House signing ceremony to officially create the agency after Congress passed it, which I should note is the legal way to launch a new agency. And as Minnesota's Attorney General, I traveled to Washington to defend the CFPB before a committee bent on destroying it. I believe in the CFPB, and I've advocated for it and defended it for almost 2 decades. But my attachment to the CFPB doesn't stem from my advocacy. It stems from the people who lost and nearly lost their homes. It stems from the people who lost their financial livelihoods, because in the years before its creation, there was practically no financial consumer watchdog to protect them from the predatory professional scammers. And now that we've got a CFPB on our side, scammers and their allies have been working tirelessly to see that that watchdog be muzzled for good. And so I'm here today to defend the CFPB once again on behalf of every single American consumer, because it is under attack. According to press reports, employees at the CFPB were abruptly informed that the agency's headquarters will be closed. This comes days after Elon Musk tweeted, "CFPB, RIP," with a tombstone emoji. CFPB's X account has been deleted. Acting Director Russell Vogt locked the building and told staff via email to stop working virtually. Effective immediately, unless expressly approved by the acting director or required by law, all employees, contractors, and other personnel of this bureau shall cease all supervision and examination activity, this email read, according to press reports. The net effect is that the CFPB is shut down, prevented from providing oversight for banks, payday lenders, and other financial institutions. The CFPB oversees $18 trillion in consumer debt and makes sure Americans are not getting ripped off. But right now, the CFPB is not operating, and scammers and schemers are hard at work. There are real risks and impacts here. First is the loss of the CFPB's statutorily mandated consumer complaint system, which fields approximately 25,000 consumer complaints about financial products and services every week. This process prioritizes consumers facing imminent home foreclosure and helps them find resources to resolve disputes. Without it, more people will be at higher risk of losing their homes. This complaint system has aided many Minnesotans, helping to correct errors in credit reports, reclaiming disputed bank deposits, and providing relief from cryptocurrency scams. Those are just a few examples. The CFPB has worked with Minnesota and other states to enforce consumer protection laws, to stop unlawful contracts offering high-interest credit, and to shut down illegal debt schemes, including one case involving Minnesota that recovered $95 million for victims. The CFPB has recovered billions of dollars from student loan companies, big banks, and predatory lenders, and put them back in the hands of consumers. Now, all of that is good work, and it's halted. Another loss, the CFPB's Civil Penalty Fund is now inactive. This fund helps to compensate victims of financial malfeasance who might not otherwise receive compensation from the defendant. Minnesota was among 9 states in a suit against Pre-Hired, a company using deceptive marketing and debt collection practices. The CFPB allocated over $4 million to compensate Pre-Hired's victims. But with the fund inactive, it's not clear if the affected Minnesotans will see another dime of what they're due. Right now, our state-chartered banks and credit unions are at a major disadvantage. I'll repeat that. Right now, our state-chartered banks and credit unions are at a major disadvantage. They're regulated by the Federal Reserve Bank, and they have to play by some very clear rules that keep their customers safe. But with the CFPB out of commission, there is no regulator watching over the big banks. The very banks that triggered the financial crisis of 2008, including some that have been cited again and again and again for irresponsible, dangerous, and illegal dealings, and I'll name names if you like. The CFPB is the primary enforcer of consumer protection laws involving large banks. They have the ability to review their records and to subpoena documents. My office cannot Without the CFPB, there is no one minding the store. After all the economic tragedy that made this agency necessary, and after all of the amazing work it has done to try to balance the scales of economic justice, it is outrageous to me that anyone calling themselves a public servant would be willing to shutter the CFPB. It makes me feel that the same anger I felt sitting in Miss Sharon's living room all those years ago. And I can't think of any agency that does more to help people afford their lives. And I call on all of us to protect Minnesotans by protecting the CFPB. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Attorney General. I appreciate you coming, and I will start with the questions. So grateful for the work you're doing. I guess my biggest question would be, and I know your office is still absorbing the changes. You've described very clearly how you were at the founding of the CFPB, impact that it had on your constituents, why you stood up for it in Congress, and why you stand for it as Attorney General. If that work ceases, do you see a role for your office in stepping into the gap and protecting Minnesotans?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I do. But there are certain things that the CFPB does that I cannot do. I'll give you an example. The supervisory responsibility that the CFPB has for large banks, I don't have that authority. Now, you may recall when Wells Fargo, a few years ago, had a payment scheme for its workers where they'd get a low base salary, but when they pushed more credit cards or more accounts and different kind of transactions, then their pay would increase. The net effect of this compensation scheme was that huge numbers of fake accounts had been established in violation of law. This was not found because consumers called the CFPB or the Attorney General's office. It was found through the supervisory responsibility that only the regulator has. So that we cannot replace. Now, it's also true that the CFPB, there will be cases that we can try to absorb. We'll be doing this, we do about 60 to 85,000 calls a year since I've been the Attorney General. I suspect we're going to get many more now as they're shuttered. But the CFPB's budget compared to ours is just completely, we're just a small player compared to them. And when they come into a case, it brings a weight that really helps resolve cases quickly. I can see some defendants trying to drag out a case because they know they're only fighting with us. Whereas if the CFPB were in on it, that case would be resolved much quicker. And quite honestly, with the staff we have, even we'd probably have to be bigger than we are in order to try to approach meeting the need. And right now, I'm already being told, "Hey, man, we're at our limit."
Grateful for the work that you're trying to do. Any other questions or comments for the Attorney General from the committee? Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for the good work you're doing. It sounds like you've really been a part of the formation of this department, so I think it was really important that we heard from you today, and we'll keep working together going forward.
May I say, Mr. Chairman, from the standpoint of economic fairness, your hearing today on the CFPB is as important as it gets. It's not just the consumers. It's also other businesses and banks. When one sector of banks is regulated and another one is not, the banks who are not regulated have a competitive advantage over the ones that are. And this results in real money and could result in bank failures for some banks as people shuffle money into the unregulated sector. So it's not just for the consumers that I am fearful. It's also for our state chartered banks, our community banks, and this is, I think, a very serious concern for us all. So I thank you for the opportunity to address the committee, and I thank all the committee members. And if anyone would like more information, we stand ready to answer those questions.
Thank you for your work. Members, committee is adjourned.